We're live. Yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool. Very good. Very good. And okay. Very good. So awesome. We are live as well. Wonderful. That's great. All right. Hello. Hi, everybody. This is great to have you here. Whether you are in the room or on Facebook or on YouTube, it's going to be a great day. It is Friday morning for me in Australia, but it is Thursday afternoon for Zaina in America, in the US. So wherever you are in the world, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, because you might be wherever. And maybe you're watching live, or maybe you're going to watch later as well. So whatever is your circumstances, you are welcome. And we are very happy to share with you today. Today, we're going to talk about the big picture of raising a child in multiple language. And I'm really excited about this conference today. So I really want to extend a massive welcome to everybody. All right, so just a little word of introduction. My name is Lou. I am a linguist, and I've raised my children in multiple languages. They're now teenagers, and when they were little, they could speak 6 languages. Today, we're maintaining 3 because the situation have changed a little bit. We are now in a blended family situation with new languages coming in. So it is something really fun, obviously, to do. But I studied linguistics, and especially teaching in a special language, which is, like immersion program, for example, and all these sort of things. And I've trained multiple teachers around the world to do that. I've implemented programs or schools, even being bilingual or multilingual. I'm currently the foundation principal of a multilingual international college, pre-prep to year 12. And I've worked with countless families who are trying to raise their children in more than one language and have all sorts of questions, all sorts of circumstances. So you are not alone in that boat. And I really hope that you can have some of your questions answered today. And I'm really excited today because I'm joined by Zaina, and Zaina has a great story of growing up as a multilingual child, and she's obviously now a multilingual adult. And I think that will really help you listening to a testimony to see the big picture for your child or your children by saying, oh, yes, of course, one day my child is going to be an adult and they're going to have a fantastic story to tell. So thank you, Zaina. Thank you very much for being here today, or yesterday for you, because you are still Thursday.
Yes, thank you so much.
Very good, very good. So in the course of this conference, if you have any question, please ask your questions in the chat, or if you are not watching live and you're watching later, first we're going to give you some contact details. So whether to Zaina or to myself, you can ask your questions directly, or you can put them in the chat, and we check our social media as well. So if you ask questions later, we will make sure to return to your questions. So please do not hesitate, because that's why we are doing that, is to help you answer your questions. So today, what I really want to talk about is the big picture. Like when you are expecting your first child, or you are raising, a toddler, or your child starts to grow a little bit, you're kind of, like in there, and sometimes you don't really see the whole picture. And this is important for you, that your child speaks different languages. Maybe this is your language of origin, this is your birth language, or maybe this is a language that you really like, and even if you're not native of that language, you still want to share that with your child. So this is important. You have some great reason and arguments to believe that it is right, but you don't always think of the big picture. And like, my child is an adult, what is it going to look like for them? What opportunities is it going to open for them? And as Zaina will actually show us, it opened a lot of doors and great opportunities in all sorts of fields. So let's have a look. Maybe you think of the advantage that it gives in terms of vocabulary. Being able to speak multiple languages is going to give your child a great ability to know a lot of vocabulary and then, be a very good communicator in life. Or you're thinking of their social skills. And for example, empathy. We know that growing up multilingual gives us more compassion and empathy towards others. And you really want that, to nurture that in your child. Or you'll know that being multilingual makes you more flexible in your thinking, more creative. And you'll think that having a child that thinks outside of the box is fantastic. Well, you know what? A child that thinks outside of the box becomes an adult that thinks outside of the box. And that's absolutely fantastic. Or maybe you're just concerned about their academic performance, and you know that multilingual children perform better at school, and that is for the moment what you're focusing about. Well, guess what? This is true that children who grew up in multiple languages are usually better performer at school. How does that translate later in life? That is also an advantage, and we're going to talk about that today. All right, let me break that down a little bit and try to focus on 3 different things why you know that being multilingual for your child is beneficial today and later as they grow up as an adult. Okay, so being multilingual as a child gives your children a higher cognitive ability. And it's been studied, all the studies reveal that it improves the brain executive function. It gives the children a higher memory retention. It makes them better at problem solving. They're more creative. They're also more resilient to change because they are used to be thinking with different mindsets. We know that we have a different mindset depending on the language that we speak. So this is why our children are much more resilient to change than others. It makes them less distracted and more focused as well as children, but also as adults. And this is traits that we found in multilingual professionals and adults. And you're absolutely right if this is what you want to nurture in your children. Of course, social abilities is something that matters a lot to you as a parent. This is all the soft skills that is not really part of the school curriculum, and you're trying to teach that your children because no one else is going to do so. And growing up in multiple languages actually gives you a strong advantage in these social skills or soft skills, because multilingual children are more open-minded, they're more adjusted to change, they're more tolerant in terms of culture differences. They're also much more open to unfamiliar situations because they are used to think outside of the box, and they're quite good at understanding other people's point of view because they used to think with different point of view as well. So that makes them better communicators, as we know as children. But all of this translates as well into adulthood. And when they grow up, all these traits actually remain in our multilingual children and becoming multilingual adults. And then I'm going to talk about one last aspect that is less known, but very, very important. Did you know that bilingualism protects the brain against cognitive decline? And it is a strong protection against disease like Alzheimer or, all this memory loss type of disease. It makes your brain more healthy than the brain of a monolingual person. So that is really big picture. When you are looking at your little baby and you're trying to tell them nursery rhymes in Spanish, German, English, all sorts of languages, you probably don't think at this baby as 80, 90 or 100 years old in the nursery home, but you should, because you're giving them a wonderful gift by protecting their brain against this cognitive decay. So that is quite interesting to know as you're starting your journey on multilingualism. Once again, if you have any question, please ask your question because that will be even more interesting and even more interactive if you have question to ask. All right, so we're talking about big vision today, big picture, what it is to raise a child in multiple languages. And we have the fantastic Zaina with us today. So Zaina, thank you very much once again for being there. Maybe you can start by introducing yourself a little bit, like your background, the languages that you speak, all of this.
Yes, sure. Thank you so much for having me. This is wonderful. Yeah, my name is Zaina. I am first generation American in the US. My family came here from Lebanon. So from my familial background, I was raised learning Arabic in the household and French as well. And so throughout my life, I tried to, for the most part, hold on to that and practice a little bit, as a little resistant once I was younger. But I found different ways to use that. And I was in marketing and advertising for many years in the corporate world, and have recently started my own business, Sea Rock Coaching. And as a part of that, I work with a lot of people transitioning in their careers and how they can bring, be very authentic and show up as they are and bring their talents and full self to their work. And then also working through any blocks that they have, any language barriers, being bicultural, bilingual, multilingual. There's a lot of different things that maybe we were fearful of speaking up if maybe we grew up in a very English household or very English speaking society. It was maybe we weren't as proud to speak our other languages. So helping people overcome some of those linguistic blocks and overcome any limiting beliefs that they may have developed as children. So they are proud to showcase their bi or multilingual talents and tell, potential employers about that and use that as actually to their advantage as opposed to something that they're ashamed of. So I use that in my work with my international clients. I see clients all over the world. So I really love being able to help them overcome some of their experiences and help process it, and also have my own experiences that I can, refer back on and think of maybe what I needed and how I wish my language had been developed and really, promoted throughout my different experiences.
Wow, that's fantastic to see that it helps you, but it helps so many others as well, like in your career and the people you interact with and your clients as well. So it is a ripple effect a little bit to share, and I often refer as multilingualism being a love language, and I think it is for you definitely, Zaina. So going back a little bit, could you tell us a little bit what your parents did to try to encourage these different languages? Because growing up with 3 languages is definitely interesting, and different culture, growing up in the US as a first generation American. So what did they do to support these other languages? Maybe how did you react to that as well? What worked? What didn't work that well? Tell us a little bit about this childhood and teenage journey.
Yes, of course. There's a lot of funny stories there, but ultimately, we grew up in a state that actually did have a Middle Eastern population. So we did have some access to Arabic tutors. However, I was in, an English speaking school. My primary was all English speaking. There was really no access to any other languages. So as we got a little bit older, my parents tried to bring on different tutors. So we would go to school, the normal duration. And then outside of that, my parents tried to have us work with different tutors. And, being a kid and being very active, wanting to hang out with friends and being involved in other extracurriculars like sports, I wanted nothing to do with extra work and extra education. So I did everything that I could and everything in my power to get all of these tutors fired, which was, I ran through a bunch of different tutors in the US. I had even my mom and a bunch of her friends tried to tutor us. On top of that was maybe short-lived. The only thing that did kind of last we used to spend our summers in Lebanon in the Middle East, and there was a woman there who stuck with us, I think primarily because truly she was a very scary person. So she did not, unfortunately for me, she did not take no for an answer. So we did get some progress with her. But yeah, mostly my experience was having to do that outside of my traditional education, which, you know, as a parent, it's hard to sell your kids on just education all day long, like more education than there is the opportunity to play and be creative and you know, fit in with your friends. Because another, you know, I guess kind of downside for me was that made me feel less accepted into my friend group, having to do that on the outside. But it did, I mean, we did have other family friends who their kids, their extracurriculars more less focused on like sports, for instance, like mine were. Their extracurriculars were more of like the math and education and reading route. So they actually thrived having tutors outside of it. So it really kind of depends on the child and where their passions lie and how you can kind of incorporate the two.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing, not just the, you know, the nice picture, everything is fine, but the real struggle, because it is the case. And our parents today might experience some rejection from their children who also, like you, are a little bit reluctant to have a tutor or extra education or this other languages when their friend may not have to do that. So it's important to know that, yes, it is a reality. Still today, we can tell that you are very positive about this, having, you know, grown up in 3 languages, and the fact that you are using that in your adult life. So it's kind of like, stick to it, parents, because your child may say thank you one day, I suppose. Was it something as well for you? Like, you grew up so in an English speaking country. English is traditionally seen as, you know, like a dominant language, something that is valued, something that is kind of powerful to speak. How was it with French and Arabic? Was there a different perception towards this language, these 2 languages? Was it like, in terms of affection, what did that represent, Arabic and French versus the English?
Yeah, Arabic and French for me, because my family was Lebanese and they were actually French educated, and Lebanon isn't the only country, but that's unique in having this, but it was very interesting because my parents spoke to me growing up they would speak to me in Arabic and I would respond in English. But as I grew older, I realized that linguistically, some of the words that we would say to each other when I thought we were just speaking Arabic, we were actually piecing together other pieces. Like, for instance, there's, to this day, I don't really even know what the word, I don't know that we have a word in Arabic. Maybe it's like a formal word, but for cake. So for instance, I would be speaking in Arabic and thinking I was only speaking Arabic, and I would say gâteau, which means cake in French.
Yes.
And so I just always thought, I didn't even realize that I was intermingling a lot of the languages, which there's nothing wrong with it. It actually really worked to my benefit and made me, whereas some people would get frustrated that they either know one language or they don't, and they kind of get stuck. If I was to kind of get stuck, I would be able to weave in another word from English or French. And for the most part, my family, just all of us being trilingual, completely understood what we were talking about. You know, it's funny, in Lebanon, a lot of people, even we like laugh about it. You'll say something like, "Hi, Kifak, Sava, are you okay?" You know, you're just naturally weaving in all the 3 languages. So it's really beautiful. I guess from the standpoint of learning, or maybe perceptions, growing up, at least where I grew up, there were no Arabic classes offered. It was only kind of the traditional, like, if you decided to choose another language to learn, which I believe for the most part, at least in my school, was a choice. You could take another language. It was pretty much, just French, either Latin, French, or Spanish. There weren't many diverse languages that you could learn. Those were kind of the primary ones that were taught. But definitely beneficial having been around my family who is always speaking other languages like Arabic and French, regardless of whether I was fully capable of speaking and formulating sentences. I always received the information and I could comprehend it. So my comprehension was a lot higher than my actual being able to put together sentences, which regardless still proved immensely valuable for me.
Absolutely. I think what you describe is really this flexible thinking and the strategy to jump from a language to another to manage to express what you have to say. If you're missing a word, well, you borrow the word from another language. This is typically strategies that children use, and we call that code switching. This is perfectly normal in the learning process. And I think we shouldn't prevent children to using these strategies, because this is how they learn, this is how they express themselves, and it actually makes you willing to get to the problem. You want the cake and you're going to say it, even if you don't know the word in a language, you want the cake, so you're going to achieve that, right? And I think this is where the problem solving side of things just kicks in, because you want to solve a problem, you're going to maneuver your way around until you get to that point. So that is really good. Tell us a little bit, Zaina, maybe in terms of culture as well, because learning a language is not just words. We know that, and I think you've already hinted to that. But in terms of culture as well, like what does that make you as an individual, as your identity, to grow up with different cultures and the person that you are today? So in terms of culture.
Yeah, the culture, I mean, having the language, marrying the language and the culture is so key, because if you are missing, I mean, you can have one without the other. It's just not as impactful, right? Like when I was listening to something recently and they were talking about, the woman was talking about the different jokes. I think she was actually from France, from Paris. And she was saying, when she's in the US, she doesn't feel very connected to people because she didn't grow up watching the same TV shows or having the same experiences and laughing at the same jokes. A lot of things get very lost in translation. So being able to marry the two of those, to be immersed in the culture and to understand the meaning of the words and the ceremonies and the rituals is much more impactful, and it leaves a different taste in your mouth, or a different long-standing memory when I mean, it's one thing you can try to have someone translate it to you and say, oh, this word means X and we say this because whatever. It just hits a little bit differently and it resonates differently when you're able to understand it in the language. And a lot of people will feel this too, if they're trying to explain a joke or a saying, if you translate it literally, the majority of the time it doesn't make any sense, right? But and you try to struggle to find the exact words or maybe a similar saying, but it's you have this big challenge of it's so funny or it's so emotional or so inspirational when you say it in the one language, but when you try to translate it or make someone else understand, if you've ever had that experience, it either kind of falls short and you don't really get the message across, or you just kind of don't even want to share it because it doesn't really make sense, so it doesn't resonate. Whereas if you were able to deliver that message in the original language and have the audience hear it, it really resonates and it hits a lot deeper. So having the ability to understand different languages and even make the effort to translate things is very important. And I've definitely found that more so in a professional environment, or when you're really trying to get to know someone at a deep level. You feel that level of disconnect. Like today we have the holidays in the US. So if you're going to visit family, or say like a spouse's family, and they all speak another language, you know that they're most likely not talking about you, but just watching people laugh and speak in another language in your presence, if you've ever experienced that feeling of like, oh, like what are they saying? I'm missing out. Like it kind of makes you feel bad or feel small. Like it's really important to be able to have not only see and witness and experience the culture, but be able to understand or at least get a little bits and pieces of what they may be talking about, you know, like the high level topic.
Absolutely. I think you're kind of showing here the sense of belonging that it gives you, that you belong to a community because you can understand what's going about, you can understand the humor, and that's definitely jokes. You can't translate them, that we know that, but we can create bilingual jokes sometimes, and it's only bilingual speaking this language and that language that can understand. And it's just this is what we're doing in my family, and we found that hilarious, and no one else can understand. So it creates also this glossolalia, a language that is just our own as well. So that's definitely something really important, I think, in the identity growing up, to have this identity growing, this safety to know that we belong to this group, we understand what's going on, we can laugh at the jokes, and we can take part of that. In anything that your parents did or did not do, is there anything that you wish they have done more, or they had done better? Anything else that you know, looking back, you're thinking, oh, I wish my parents had done this, or I wish they didn't do that? Anything like this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think when I think of when I'll be raising my own kids, I think I would definitely want to put them in some sort of an immersion program or school as early on as possible. And the benefit of that, at least for me in hindsight, I mean, granted, I grew up in a trilingual household. So I was learning English as I was learning to speak, and also learning Arabic just by way of communicating with my parents. But I think immersing me in whatever other sort of schooling or program from a very young age, I think would be very beneficial, because when you're that young, it's not painful to learn, right? You don't have the memories of learning. So I feel like it kind of sticks from a foundational perspective, it sticks a lot easier. Like no one necessarily remembers learning how to speak. They may remember learning certain things in grade school where they started putting together sentences and started stumbling. But if you're able to introduce it a lot sooner, I think that would be super beneficial. And that's something I would like to do with my kids, because then once they get a little bit older, you have that resistance, and you're starting from point zero at age, 6, 10, 12, whatever that is. And they have less of a foundation to build on. Even if they, you put them in a bilingual, even like nursery program, and the kids and everything that they're on. So it's not just at home that they're listening to different languages. Their babysitters or the people who are teaching in these schools are also speaking to them in other languages. So as soon as they leave the house, they're still surrounded by that. That's one thing that I feel like I would want to do. Obviously, assuming I have the access to it with my kids, or in whatever way, if I didn't have access to those types of programs, assuming you're teaching your kids in school in person, to see if any way that they're playing, just like you're learning. I mean, a lot of kids in the US, I've heard, have like iPads in school, and they're learning and they're playing all of these games. So seeing if some of the games that they're playing are also in different languages, not just their primary language. So their brain is kind of expanding that way. They're learning both languages. So when you decide, if they step away from it, or if life gets busy and then they pick it up later on in life, they have a little bit of a foundation. It's not like they're starting from scratch earlier on. And there's maybe a little bit less resistance because of that. Like in my experience, yes, we had Arabic in the household. My mom always spoke to us in Arabic. We typically, my sister and I, always responded in English. And because Arabic is just a little bit different, there's its own alphabet, and the spoken and the written is very classical. It's not the way that you typically speak. It was almost like learning another language. So it was almost like starting from square one when we were a little bit older. So I think that's the biggest thing. Both the immersion would be one, and then the immersion at a younger age, I think, would be much more beneficial to also help combat that resistance.
Yeah, of course, and being surrounded by other kids in the same situation probably helps as well, because you're not the only one, and you don't feel like you're punished and you're missing out on playing, because you all do it together. Is probably a great thing. So yeah, thank you so much for this experience. I have a little bit of a technical question, because in terms of multilingualism, sometimes the parents I talk to think that their children is not multilingual because they can't speak all the languages at the same level of fluency. And they would say, oh yes, well, they speak fluently the language of the country we live in, but all language, yeah, they speak a little bit, but they're missing words, they're not very confident, everything. So would you say, Zaina, that you speak all your 3 languages at the same level?
Definitely not. No, I don't speak them at the same level, but there's absolutely value to it. And I've seen the value in my work. And try to think of, in what situation do you have to have the same level of absolute fluency, right? Like, unless your job is, a high-end translator, like you're working perhaps for like the government or some job where every little technical detail, a doctor, a lawyer, where every technical detail is absolutely mandatory. It's your level of proficiency definitely doesn't matter. It may matter and mean something to you as the parent because you want your child to be as proficient as possible. But if you take a step back and you think about it, how does your child fare or compare against, just a monolingual speaker or their friends? Say you come from a family that speaks English and French, and your children, your son and his friends go to France. He speaks and understands, maybe he understands a lot of French, but doesn't really speak it. And all of his friends just speak English. He's already 10 steps ahead. If anything happens, someone's running through the streets screaming, he will understand, like, is this, what's going on? Should we be fearful? What's the situation? And he can probably communicate out of that situation much more efficiently than any of his friends. I think a lot of times we really want the best for our children, and we want to give them the same access, if not better, to different tools and resources that we have. But just because they're not equally as proficient, it by no means, it doesn't really matter. Even from a professional standpoint, right? A lot of some like interviews or job applications, for instance, may ask, do you speak another language? But typically they'll say, like, what is your level of proficiency? Should it matter? Like, are you a native speaker? Do you speak conversationally? Can you translate very high level documents? Like, there's different layers and levels. And for the most part, you don't necessarily need to have that highest level unless it's, absolutely necessary for the work that you're doing. So just because your kid only, the comprehension is honestly much better than, it's way 10 steps ahead than anyone who is hearing it and they just hear, a voice. So just being kind to your kids and knowing that, like, they do understand a lot more than they're speaking or than they're leading on.
Absolutely. And I really thank you, Zaina, for sharing that with us, because this is something I'm really passionate about. And there's a lot of false belief around that. If the children don't achieve at the same level of expertise and fluency all their languages, then they're not multilingual. And then parents just give up. And they're like, oh yeah, oh, they just speak a few words. That's not enough. Let's focus on the, you know, English or whatever language is valued the most or deemed the most useful. And this is really sad to see, because as you say, you can speak multiple languages at different level of proficiency, and that's okay. It still gives you all the benefits of being multilingual. And as you grow, that may change as well. I know that when my children grew up, well, they didn't grow up with the 6 languages at once. And initially, French was the strongest of these languages. And then they were speaking other languages on the side. Today, French is not the strongest of this language because they live in Australia and they do their schooling in English. So English is their strongest language. And that's okay. They still have the French, they still use it, and they still use some of the other languages as well on the side. It doesn't make them less of a multilingual, and same as adults. I think we know it. When we write our resume, you're right. We write in the languages that we speak, and we write the level of proficiency. And that might be quite different depending of the job we're applying to or the circumstances we found ourselves in. So I think this is really really good, and really I want to thank you, Zaina, because your experience of growing up as a multilingual really helps, I think, our parents to see the big picture and see how beneficial it is and how they can overcome some of the false beliefs that maybe they are facing today, or maybe some of the criticism that other monolingual may, you know, throw at them, thinking, oh, you know, you're not doing that well, or maybe you should focus on just the one language. So I think this is a great experience, and I'm sure all parents listening today or on replay really will appreciate and will feel encouraged by this experience. Maybe just to finish, is there any funny anecdote or something a little bit funny that you'd like to share growing up as a multilingual, being in, you know, 2 different countries, Lebanon and America? Anything in particular, like a funny story, maybe growing up as a child?
There's so many funny stories. I guess kind of going back to the Arabic tutors, you know, we were so resistant to having them. I'm trying to think. I mean, we had this one guy, I don't know if we were talking about this earlier, but we had this one guy, you know, the movie Aladdin. His name was Jafar, and he looked exactly like the character in Jafar. He was one of the people that we kicked to the curb, and just having, it always makes me laugh. You know, even thinking, I didn't mention this previously, but there was actually an Arabic speaking school that my mom considered sending us to. And I remember, I don't know how old I was, but we did a tour of the school, and compared to the school that I was already in, is very, very small. And I remember thinking, because I was such an athlete, like I remember crying inside thinking, like, they don't have any sports, like it's going to be like my own prison being here. And for whatever reason, after that, you know, my mom would threaten us. She was like, well, if you act up, we're going to send you to this school. So learning that the extra language was almost like a punishment. So we would try to be really good. And I remember we toured this school, and after, we never heard anything about it. We never heard at all, like anything. And so my sister and I just were like, oh, we you know, mom just forgot, we don't have to do this anymore. And we didn't come to find until years later, just different things about the program that my mom, you know, decided just didn't seem to be the best fit for us, that they were going to be pushing on us. And it was just so funny, because me and my sister, after that, you know, for a little bit, when you get reprimanded for something, you try to act really good and say you're never going to do anything again. So we did kind of abide by going through, I think at the time, because we'd fired all those Arabic tutors, my mom and her friends were doing a tutoring for us, so that we tried to be really abiding and play into getting the tutored by my mom and her friends, only because we thought if we didn't pay attention there, we were going to get sent to this Arabic speaking school. So it's just funny thinking of, as a child, all of the things and all of the efforts that you will do to resist this. Even that woman in Lebanon, we would watch her, we would sit on the balcony and watch her, get out of the car and come up into the building, and we would just disperse. I would lock myself in the bathroom. My sister would hide in the closet. Every single time it was just a whole production trying to get us to learn the language. And I would imagine some of the parents hopefully haven't experienced this, but if you have, I was that child, it's fine. But, ultimately as an adult, I almost wish that I wasn't as resistant. I wish I had been able to lean into it. I just wish that there was something that we could have done about it to make it work, because even this woman in the summer, it was summer vacation. So that was taking away from me being in Lebanon with my family and my friends. And it truly felt like it was punishment that I was, learning, which was also a benefit. So if there's any way that you can, make it fun for your kids, or I don't want to say reward them, but make it so they don't feel like they're missing out in time and activities with their friends, because that's also super, super important. So if there's any way that they can be around that language, and it feels more like fun as opposed to gamifying whatever it is, as opposed to being a punishment and, oh, now we have to send you to this tutor. I have phenomenal memories from it and I can laugh at it now, but in hindsight, I do wish that I had more of that those foundational learnings, because I did use my language in some of my previous jobs. And it absolutely worked to my advantage. It built great rapport with people in my company and some of our vendors and our partners. But it would have also been nice too, to be able to work at a higher level, and from more of a business standpoint, having a little bit more of the technical knowledge as well. But yeah.
All right, that's awesome, Zaina. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. If our families have a question for you, where can they find you?
Yes, they can find me. I typically post, I post a lot on Instagram. So feel free to follow me on Instagram. I also have Facebook. I'll put the information for that in the chat, as well as my LinkedIn page. I'll also add my email and my website. I'm reachable on any of those platforms at any time. I'd love to chat. If you have questions just about my experiences, I'm more than happy to share that, or how I've used it, or what my experience with my family was. Any of those, I'm more than happy to connect and chat. I'd love that.
Wonderful. That is awesome. So thank you so much for putting the details here in the chat. Maybe we'll put the details in the chat on Facebook and YouTube once the video is on there as well, because I don't think that translates from a platform to another, but we'll make sure that you have Zina's detail if you feel you have some questions, and that'd be really wonderful to continue sharing on this big vision, big picture of growing up as a multilingual. So thank you very much, everybody, for attending today or in replay. It was a pleasure, Zaina, to have you, and I'm so excited to hear your experience and your story, because it really proves that growing up multilingual is such a gift in life, even when we are an adult. If you feel the need to continue to ask questions, or if you want to continue on the journey of raising your child in multiple languages, feel free to tag the QR code on the screen as well. You can join us on our website or follow our Facebook page, or you can go ahead and book a consultation straight away to talk about your own family situation. I will be very happy to meet you there as well, and to answer all your questions. All right, well, that's about it for today. Thank you very much for watching this conference, and I hope that it was an encouragement to you to raise your child in multiple languages and to continue the journey. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.